You guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah. But you want to mute yourself once the meeting starts. Great. Good evening. This is the City Council meeting for Tuesday, April 21st. I will be calling the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. Please rise, face the nearest flag to you, place your right hand over your heart, and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Menchaca,
Here.
Vice Mayor Liao,
Here.
Councilmember Ding,
Here.
Councilmember Harrington,
Here.
Councilmember Pu.
Here.
Great, thank you. So tonight's meeting is live streamed on cable channel 3 in our online platform. Please email all public comments to cityclerk@sgch.org. Again, cityclerk@sgch.org. No later than the time the item is considered by the council tonight. Comments received after items have been considered will not be read into the record. Comments will be read by Assistant City Clerk Marilyn Bonus for up to 3 minutes each. Agenda items will be introduced by Chief City Clerk Sharon Clark. So now let's see, our first item is the approval of the agenda order. But before I ask for approval, City Manager Lazaretto would like to make a brief announcement.
Thank you, Mayor Menchaca and members of the council. I just wanted, for the purposes of the public who are listening to this, I know last meeting on April the 7th, we had a discussion item on the speed study, and that created a lot of interest from the community. And we received several emails that will be part of the record when we bring this item back to the City Council for consideration. But I think there was some confusion as to when we would be bringing it back. And I didn't want members of the public tonight who might be listening to think that it was going to be on tonight's agenda. We are doing some work with our engineering staff, with our police department staff, and our city attorney staff to relook at that item. And that will be coming back most likely in one of our 2 May meetings. And that will be put on the agenda. And all of the feedback that we've received from the public thus far will be included. And several of those will be read into the record as part of that meeting. So I just didn't want anybody out there to be thinking that we were going to be bringing that back tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And just a reminder, if you still have, if you didn't get your comments in yet, we're still accepting them. You just send them to our city clerk and she will make sure that they get to the appropriate individuals. So thank you everyone for taking an interest, and we are listening. So thank you. So at this time, are there any objections to the agenda order? Okay,
Nope.
No. Okay. So I hear none. So the agenda order is approved. Okay. Next item, please.
Presentations. Item A, COVID-19 update on city operations. Presentations will be made by Fire Chief Wallace, Police Chief Harris, Assistant City Manager and Community Development Director Shaparian, Community Services and Interim Mission Playhouse Director Perez, City Manager Lazaretto, and Mayor Menchaca.
Thank you. And just for the public as well as my colleagues, I just want to make clear that this will be an ongoing presentation on the agenda until COVID-19 ends. We want to try to keep the public informed on a timely basis on all the efforts that are being taken by our first responders and city staff So this might be a little longer because it's the first one, but I think you'll feel that it's valuable information and worth the time to really carefully listen to all our heroes here in our city. So I will begin with Fire Chief Wallace, Steve Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight, I'll give you a quick update on the fire department's operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm happy to report that as of today, we are 100% healthy. We don't have anybody out on any sort of sickness, and we're meeting our minimum staffing goals without any changes on our normal deployment plans. There are, as of today, 23 confirmed COVID cases in San Gabriel, and the fire department has had contact with approximately 14 of those cases. Over half of those we have transported. 2 of our members have shown symptoms over the last few weeks, but have tested negative, and the symptoms have since resolved, and everyone is back to work. Statistically, San Gabriel is still at or below the average per 100,000 people in cities of similar size in the San Gabriel Valley. Our statistical rate is 56.16 cases per 100,000. We can compare that to San Marino, which is up at 67 cases per 100,000. South Pass is up at 130.5 cases per 100,000, and Monterey Park is at 75.5. So we're at or below average with all that. So our citizens are doing really, really well with the distancing orders and stay-at-home orders. Last week, we had a member sent to the Los Angeles Fire Department. He was embedded with them for a day, taking part in train the trainer training for mass decontamination. With that training, we now have the ability, using equipment that we pretty much had with very, very, very little outlay, we can now decontaminate fire stations, police stations, city hall, and lots of public facilities as needed. This is basically set up that if we do have an exposure or suspected exposure in one of our facilities, we can get it mitigated right away and get that facility back in operation. I'm happy to report also that our PPE, our personal protective equipment stock, is very solid. A lot of that is due to donations we've received, been arranged by some council members and a very, very generous public. And at our current, what they call burn rate or usage rate, we have about a 3-month supply. So we're very, very solid on our PPE, and we thank you for all your support with that. We were happy to participate yesterday in the Heroes Parade that went by the hospital. The police chief may speak to that, so I won't steal the thunder on that one, but we were very, very happy to be part of that. It looked great when we went by, and probably saw 100+ hospital employees outside, and that was my assistant Liz, who was in the car with me, said, wow, this is a really, really emotional moment, and she was happy to be there. So that's basically my report, and I'm happy to field any questions.
Okay. Well, we're just going to leave the questions until the end because we have quite a few, so my colleague could just jot down your questions. Next, Police Chief Harris. Chief, we can't hear you.
I always seem to forget to do that. Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and members of the council, good evening. This will be the police department brief. I'll start it with the operational briefing. I'm proud to report that we are at 100% staffing. We have no COVID illnesses, and we are operating at a modified level 2. What that means to the members of the public is that our special assignment personnel, detectives, traffic, and other specialized assignments are working stints in patrol to make sure that we have adequate personnel in case there is a problem associated with this pandemic. Additionally, all of our personnel, including command staff, are unable to take vacation, holiday, or any of those types of issues until we return to some type of normal operations. So we are fully staffed and providing full service to the community. Crime, from a crime perspective, there's really no real rise in crime. In fact, we've experienced a dip in calls for service and a dip in basic property crimes and crimes against persons. We have, however, had a little bit of an uptick in domestic violence. Domestic violence cases. None of them have been extreme, but kind of the cabin fever effect on people sometimes creates an uptick in this. We are managing it and reaching out to members of the community to offer services and other options for them during this time. But we've had no significant increase in other types of crime, and we're doing in that realm. Calls for service have gone down a little bit over the last couple of weeks. We are kind of everybody observing the stay-at-home order, so we're not getting quite as many folks out and getting involved in things that require response of the police. However, we are ready to respond with a full response to any type of full-service police problem. We are still working with our task force partners. That includes LA Impact and HIDA. We still have our folks working with those partners, so we have access to those resources should they become necessary. We definitely want to show that we have a lot of appreciation for the donations that we have received from members of the public. We've gotten many masks and other items that are useful to our folks on the front lines. And so our patrol and first responder folks are really enjoying the use of those donations and appreciate all the input from council members as well as community members in getting those tools. It is invaluable to our ability to keep providing the service that we provide. We're also regularly meeting with members of the city council weekly to make sure that we are keeping them abreast of the items that are important to members of the community. Although there haven't been a whole lot of changes in the last couple of weeks, we're making sure that we're all communicating so that you folks are getting the best and most recent information. From an overall COVID brief perspective, the County Emergency Operations Center is still open. That is the center that is really at the hub of the county's response to this pandemic. I sit on that board for the LA County Chiefs and sit on the briefing every day at 3 o'clock for the CEOC briefing. Of late, the last week or so, there haven't been many changes, but we can update some of our online information with the numbers, and I'll refer you to the CDC and LA County Department of Public Health websites for any of that information. The LA County police chiefs are heavily involved in law enforcement response to this problem. We meet at least 3 times a week now. It was daily. We've reduced it to 3 times a week to deal with any questions that might come up with regard to law enforcement responses in the county. So I would put out to any member of the community who wants questions answered, you can feel free to give me a call or anyone at the police station, and we can give you the updated information. I'm not sure how many are aware of Project Room Key, which is a project where they're looking to seek to place homeless in hotels throughout the county. There's information that's still coming in on that, so we won't discuss that in detail tonight. However, we can say that we do not have any hotels in San Gabriel who are currently participating in that process. As far as the community participating in the voluntary compliance, we are really glad at the efforts of all of the community members here and the staff for putting the information out. We are gaining community compliance and all the things that we are doing. We haven't had to write one single citation for anyone who is violating any of the precepts of the stay-at-home orders or the masking. And so I'm very proud of the people in the community and the staff for that. That's a good thing for us to be able to say, where there are other agencies who may be writing some citations in the larger cities. That is not happening in San Gabriel and not in the West San Gabriel Valley, to my knowledge. The other item I'd like to make sure that we give a little kudos to is the fire, like the fire chief said, police department and the fire department participated in a heroes parade yesterday for the emergency medical staff and the other staff at San Valley Medical Center. And I have to say that I was so proud to be a part of that, to go by and watch the people who come into work every day knowing that they're going to be confronted with folks who may have this disease, and they come to work and go in there and take care of the business. So it was really good for us to all be a part of a situation where we could go ahead and give them praise. I consider them to be the real America's 911 during this process. They are really the front lines of what's happening with this pandemic. With all that said, I turn it over to whoever's next, Mayor, and we'll hold for questions until later.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Next presenter is Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director, Armine Chaperon.
Good evening, Mayor Menchaca and members of the City Council. I'd like to give you an update on where we are with our economic development efforts. First and foremost, before the mandate closures were in place, staff had actually already started making phone calls to our top sales producers to see if COVID-19 was impacting their businesses and encouraging them to explore multi-channel sales and marketing. As soon as the orders were put in place, we immediately took action and dedicated a portion of the economic development website to be set up as a COVID-19 resource center. This includes federal and state financial resources, payment relief, and nonprofit assistance. Within this area, we've included a restaurant guide that many of you have seen, and so has our community, which illustrates the restaurant services, the drive-through services. Our staff called over 200 businesses to obtain this information, and we put it in a directory that was immediately launched. Within this section, we've also included marketing materials for the restaurant businesses that are still open. We've also included store hours and information relating to grocery stores. And the list actually continues to evolve as we obtain updates from the businesses themselves. We have received a number of inquiries. There are some businesses that thought they should be listed. Unfortunately, if they're not within our city boundaries, they are not included on this list because the restaurant directory is specifically for restaurants within the city of San Gabriel boundary. We have been maintaining constant communication with the businesses, and this is all businesses in the city, by sending weekly emails to our business community, which is about 1,500 businesses on our listserv, regarding new financial resources and LA County mandates as they evolve. We've also had great feedback we received from folks who are getting these updates. And there are weeks where, because there's so much information coming out, we are sending these emails sometimes twice or 3 times a week. And we continue to do that as the information continues to be available. We actually also worked with our local grocery stores and encouraged them to dedicate hours specifically for seniors, pregnant shoppers, and persons with disabilities. We were successful in having 99 Ranch Market, 168 Market, and Mitsua Market, as they were able to work with their corporate offices and made the accommodations for our residents. We've also continued to work closely with our public information officer and the city manager's office in regards to our community kindness efforts and publishing various stories. For economic development in particular, we've worked with Bonchon, Hawaii Market, and Bubble Republic. We are also continuing to provide what we call our business concierge services by regularly plugging in with grocers and other essential businesses and being available by phone and email to any business with questions or in need of our assistance. Along with this, we've also gotten various calls from the community questioning whether certain businesses are considered essential, non-essential, which means working closely with the police department and code enforcement to make sure, first and foremost, we're doing the education piece with our businesses, if need be, then the enforcement piece. We will continue all of these efforts in the coming weeks, and we anticipate in the near future to provide council with a plan for recovery, resiliency, and reinvestment as it pertains to economic development. Thank you for the opportunity to present this information to you tonight.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of information. Next, we have Community Services and Interim Mission Playhouse Director, Rebecca Perez.
Good evening, Mayor Menchaca and members of the City Council. I'd like to provide an update on programs that we are providing for seniors. Our nutrition program has expanded to meet the needs of our local seniors. Since March 31st, community services staff has delivered meals so that our seniors are able to stay safer at home. We are currently delivering a weekly supply of meals, which includes 2 prepared meals and 3 frozen meals, to a list of over 90 seniors. This is a huge increase over our regular meal program, which typically has 35 to 40 seniors on a regular basis. With the recent directive for all to wear masks, we are also delivering several masks weekly to each senior. The seniors are very appreciative of this weekly delivery each Tuesday. In addition to the prepared and frozen meals provided through our contract provider YWCA, We've also received support from a San Gabriel restaurant and local faith-based organization. Bonchon Chicken provided meals for over 30 seniors, and the mosque in San Gabriel just recently, in fact today, contributed 90 bags of non-perishable food items for our seniors. The Hilton San Gabriel also provided rolls of toilet paper for our seniors. The help of these generous community partners is greatly appreciated at this time. In order to check on the mental well-being of our seniors, community services staff initiated a wellness check each Friday in addition to the weekly meal delivery. This is a great opportunity to reach out to our seniors to determine if they have any additional needs that we can assist with. And I thank you so much for providing this opportunity. I'd be happy to answer any questions when those come at the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And our last presenter is City Manager Lazaretto.
Thank you, Mayor Menchaca. I just have a couple of quick updates for the council. First of all, in addition to public safety and the ways that they're having to change their doing business, on all of our other departments, the way they're having to sort of reformat the way that they provide services to the public, the biggest effect on the city is going to be the area of our budget. And we'll be talking at the end of tonight's meeting about the effect on our current year's budget, which is our 2019-2020 fiscal year, which we have about 2 months left in. And then in early May, we'll be bringing council a draft budget to consider. We'll start that discussion for the 2020-2021 fiscal year budget, which will start on July the 1st. And there will be changes to the way that we're having to fund projects because of an expected approximately $4 million shortfall over the remainder of this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So we will be presenting options for council on how to absorb that shortfall and ways of doing that. That's going to be the biggest effect, I think, that most residents are going to see long-term from COVID-19 on the city. The second thing I wanted to talk about is rental ordinance. We adopted at our meeting in April, we adopted our first meeting in April on the 7th, we adopted an ordinance that prohibits evictions for non-payment of rent. And at that time, the county and the state did not have ordinances that covered the city of San Gabriel. The county had one that covered county areas, but not unincorporated, and unincorporated county areas, but not incorporated cities. And the state had one that allowed a framework for cities to provide that moratorium. Since that time, the LA County has adopted a more stringent eviction moratorium that is a little bit more favorable to tenants than our ordinance is. And it now applies to all of the incorporated cities in Los Angeles County. So I know that there are folks in our community who are affected by this, and there are also affordable housing advocates who watch to make sure that we're on the forefront of tenant rights legislation. I'm working very closely with our city attorney's office to determine whether we would like to let our ordinance stand or whether we are going to make changes to our ordinance or whether we're going to repeal our ordinance and fall into the county's ordinance. But I wanted to let the council and the community know that we're aware of it. And in our first meeting in May, we will be bringing action one way or the other to the council so that we are in compliance or at least not in conflict with the ordinance that the county adopted. The county's ordinance specifically left all of the city's ordinances in place, whether they were more or less stringent. They let the city's ordinances stand. So we do have an opportunity to still craft one that works for the city of San Gabriel, but we will work on one that is more in keeping with what the county provided. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions along with the rest of the staff who provided updates. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So I will be calling on each of our council members, and I'll try to switch it up a little bit too, so that not the same council member gets called first. So let's start with Council Member Harrington. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. No, I think that was very thorough. So I'm fine. I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Council Member Pooh. Do you have any questions for any of our presenters?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank police and fire departments once again for the Heroes Parade yesterday. It really was a tremendous showing of mutual support and appreciation. And I know a lot of the staff at the hospital were very appreciative. So thank you again.
Okay, Councilmember Ding.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have any question, but it's same thing. So we appreciate yesterday the police department, the fire department pray in front of our first line, the medical work. So yeah, show our community like help each other, love each other, support each other to overcome this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Lau, do you have any questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So I just have a quick question, because we probably receive more than 20,000 face masks. And according to Chief Wallace, we have 3 months of supply. But I'm just thinking, try to help our business people. Say if they their license is due and they have to come into the city hall, if we have extra mask, I'm just thinking, maybe we can't provide a free mask for them to come to the city hall to pay their business license fee. So I don't know if that's a right way to do, but just one suggestion.
Maybe I can field that one, Vice Mayor Liao. We are actually not having anybody come into City Hall. I think that's a really great suggestion, and we do everything we can to make sure that folks who come to City Hall to do business will have the safest experience possible. But we have opened up ways to pay online and over the phone. And so if somebody needs to pay their business license, we are doing everything we can to have them use one of those methods or use the old-fashioned drop a check in the mail so that they're not having to expose themselves to extra dangers by coming to the City Hall to do business. So it's been at least 2 weeks since we've had a customer in City Hall, and the community has been phenomenal in making themselves available to the other ways that we're doing business. So I do want to appreciate the business community as well as the residents for the way that they have been making use of all of those other options.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all, Vice Mayor?
Yeah.
Great.
One last. I wouldn't let you guys go that easily. But, we heard, the Orange County, all the mayors got together and they asked their supervisor, and I think they went to Washington, D.C. and asked for $555 million for this CARES Act funding. So for instance, City of Irvine asking for $47 million. So I was wondering, have we done anything like that? And because one of the CARES Act problem, threshold is limited to 500,000 population. And the majority of the cities, we are smaller, so we don't get anything. So is there some kind of initiatives from COG or from anybody that, will try to get together and ask for this CARES funding?
Vice Mayor Liao, yes, absolutely. So we have worked with the COG, and the COG has put together a joint request. The League of California Cities and the League of National Cities have all partnered together and are urging Congress to create what they're calling the 3.0 version of the stimulus package. And it's aimed squarely at providing cities and specifically those cities who weren't helped out by the CARES Act. On top of that, the city of San Gabriel sent a letter directly to our representative, Ms. Judy Chu, not only thanking her for co-sponsoring the first version of that legislation, but urging her and her colleagues to continue to support, co-author, and and vote for legislation that would provide direct relief to cities like the city of San Gabriel.
Thank you. I did receive the letter from Representative Judy Chu. So yeah, we want to thank her for helping our cities. But yeah, that's it. Because they're inside the CARES Act, also plenty of funding, 150 million for fire assistance and for I believe 500 million for police. So just keep trying. If we can get some of those funding would help our cities too. So.
And just for clarification, Vice Mayor Liao, the CARES Act and other funding sources have funding that we feel we'll be able to tap into for overtime and direct COVID-19 related expenditures. But that portion of the need that our city and most cities need is not only related to the expenditures that police and fire are having, but more importantly, the lost revenue that's going to require all cities. And I'm sure everybody's reading about the city of LA and city of Santa Monica having to lay off hundreds of employees. And so the version 3.0 relief efforts are all designed to provide revenue for or funding for lost revenue rather than just the direct expenditures related to COVID-19, because the direct expenditures for us are going to be probably less than a quarter of what our lost revenue is going to be. So the bigger need is for revenue enhancement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So it's a quarter of our revenue. Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And lastly, I just wanted to, again, thank all the presenters and appreciate the updates. And again, it was very, very thorough. The only question I had at this time was primarily for, well, both chiefs. My understanding is that there might be some hesitation or concern from residents to not call the firefighters and even the police because there's a perceived risk of being exposed to the coronavirus. So I thought maybe this could be a good time just to kind of describe the type of protective gear that our firefighters wear and our police that protects both the residents as well as the first responders. So Chief Wallace, would you like to take that first?
Sure. I'd love to jump in on that. Thank you very much. I'll split that sort of into two parts. The first is we have experienced a decrease in call volume. And more to that, we've experienced a decrease in transports. So people are calling, we're going out and assessing, making contact with the patients, but a lot of them are hesitant to be transported to the hospital. They just want to come out, get checked out. And a lot of them, it's more just to alleviate fears of what do I have, or do I really need to go get seen at the hospital? So a vast majority of the calls, the paramedics are going out, they're making contact, and they're either just reassuring the people that they're in a good spot, or they're referring them to see their own personal medical doctors, or in the cases of where they really do need to be seen, they are transporting to the hospital. The second part of that is the personal protective equipment that we're wearing. Basically changes the entire look of a firefighter. You'd expect someone to show up in a blue uniform or in their turnouts. Well, they're showing up covered in head to toe with starting on their head, usually with a cap, with a set of goggles, with a mask, a full length gown. And on the real high risk cases, we're even putting foot coverings on folks. So our procedure is that when we have a high index of suspicion, we're going to have one firefighter be completely dressed head to toe in this and go make contact with the patient. At that point, they'll assess what symptoms are showing, what the risk is, and how far we need to dress out the rest of the crew. But it could probably be intimidating looking when someone comes to your house looking like you would expect to see. I won't say quite in a horror movie, but you see in the epidemic movies and what you're seeing in the ERs with people dressed head to toe. The police department's done something great with that, and they all are wearing their pictures on the outside of the uniform, and that's something we heard you were encouraging. So we're going to start doing that in the fire department as well. We're going to take all our official department photos, laminate them up, and put them on the outside so people see that there really is an extra person under there. The other part of what we're doing is we're starting next week to shoot a series of public education videos. We're going to do, some of them will be the inner workings of the fire station, and we're also going to show a firefighter dressing up and getting ready to go and respond to one of these calls, so people can see that it is really just us under there, And we're dressing out to protect them and ourselves from any potential exposure when we arrive on scene. I hope that answers your question.
It does, especially with this virus. It's so isolating, so impersonal. And so it's helpful for people to know, to see pictures if possible. I think it just makes a big difference. Chief Harris, would you like to add anything?
Certainly, just to add that PD is working with fire when we respond on fire assist or medical calls. We're part of that protocol that the chief mentioned in determining who needs to go in first and what kind of gear they'll be wearing when they make that determination. So the wearing the pictures on the outside is a great idea in helping us kind of meet that San Gabriel Kind initiative that we're trying to get at, so that people can see what it is we're doing and who we are. So we're working well at getting that done. We have not experienced any fear or reticence to call the police department in cases. And although we've seen a decline in calls for service, most of that is because everybody's home during the day. So other types of calls that we would normally get, we're not getting. But we're monitoring it over the month to month to make sure that it's legitimate, that it's because people are home and not because of fear. We've also started to really reach out with our communications apparatus, both internal communications apparatus with our school and community engagement team, and working with our PIO, Jonathan Fuitt, putting messages out that really send that San Gabriel Kind message to folks out there to let them know that they don't have to be afraid to call us, and we're going to respond on every call. And like I said, for both us and fire, we are both staffed at 100% with no illnesses, and everybody's responding to calls as normal. So it's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Chief Wallace, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, you made a great point about it. It's very, very isolating, and it's a feeling of isolation. And we know it is with our patients, but it is with the firefighters as well, because we're really used to keeping our front door open. And we're used to interacting with people on scene, you know, not just the patients, but the families and the neighbors, because, you know, when we show up with all this lights and sirens going, people come out and want to see what's going on. And people are very hesitant now. So it's a completely different feel from what we're used to. It is very isolating, and it is felt all the way on both sides of the equation, from the patients to the city employees. It's a great point.
Thank you.
If I might, Madam Mayor, add one more piece, if I can. For police response, I want to make sure the community is aware that if anybody comes out on a response call and anybody from the community is hesitant as to whether or not they are dealing with an actual police officer, the pictures help to identify the people they're talking to, but they can also tell the officer or potential officer to stand by, and they can call dispatch, and we can verify that we have officers that are legitimately on scene. We have no problem with that, and the officers have been made aware that if a resident decides they want to exercise that, we will exercise the due caution in circumstances where it's non-emergent to wait until that contact is made, so people can feel confident that they're actually talking to the police.
That's a really good point. I know when I paid you a visit the other day, some of the officers were completely covered out of protection, obviously, but I couldn't even tell who they were. And so I can imagine, even when it's not a non-emergency, for someone to come over and you barely see their eyes, I think it could be very, very frightening. So I'm glad you're bringing that up, Chief Harris and Chief Wallace, that our residents should feel comfortable to call the dispatchers, to call in advance, take a picture of the photo ID that they have. But I understand that our first responders, they need also to be protected. So with that, let's go to the next item. City Clerk, please.
Public comment. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the City Council on items of interest that are not on the agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the San Gabriel City Council. Assistant City Clerk Bonus, please read any public comments that have been received for this portion of the agenda.
I haven't received any.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, then we'll move forward. Thank you, City Clerk Bonus, Assistant City Clerk Bonus. Next item.
Consent calendar. All items listed under the consent calendar are considered routine, and recommendations will be approved in one motion unless a member of the City Council or audience requests separate discussion. Per Mayor Menchaca, staff requests that item 4D be approved with the addition of Councilmember Ding as council liaison to the 414 to 420 South San Gabriel Self-Storage Project.
Thank you. And let's see, were there any requests from the public to pull any of the consent agenda items?
I have not received any requests.
Okay, so I will now ask the council members, each council member, if they would like to pull an item for separate discussion. So I'll start with Council Member Ding.
You mean okay. Yeah, we can, to request a separate discussion, yeah.
So are there any items or there's no items you want to pull for further discussion?
Oh, right now I don't have it. Yeah, it just,
Okay,
yeah.
great, thank you. Councilmember Harrington?
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Pu?
None for me, thanks.
Okay, Vice Mayor Lau?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. So do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay,
I'll second.
yeah, Vice Mayor?
I-
And then Councilmember Harrington? So Assistant City Clerk Bona, can you please take a vote?
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Pu,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Liao,
Aye.
Mayor Menchaca.
Aye.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Next item, please.
Public hearing, item A, adoption of resolution number 20-15, amending community services department fees in the city's 2019-2020 citywide fee schedule. Presentation will be made by Community Services and Interim Mission Playhouse Director Rebecca Perez.
Good evening, Mayor Menchaca and members of the City Council. The citywide fee schedule was adopted by Resolution 19-31 on September 17, 2019. The fee schedule includes various Community Services Department fees. Since the adoption in 2019, Community Services staff has determined that various fees either need to be updated or added. Because the fee schedule was originally adopted by resolution, subsequent amendments or additions must also be adopted by resolution. There are various proposed, John, slide 3. Thank you. There are various proposed fee updates. Community Services staff has reviewed the current fees charged for these programs and rental offerings and analyzed the cost of offering this service as well as the fees charged by surrounding cities for similar programs. The first of the proposed fees is for the Vincent Lugo Park baseball field concession stand. With the departure of Pony League, staff is proposing a monthly rental fee for the concession stand, as well as a refundable security deposit for use of this space. The monthly rental fee would be assessed to cover the cost of utilities and stand maintenance, and the security and damage deposit would be due upon signing the agreement and would be refundable at the conclusion if all areas of the agreement have been met. The second fee proposed is the jersey fee for the youth after-school sports program. This is a fee that is currently charged to pay for the cost of the jersey should the participant choose to purchase it for their sport. Since the fee charged is just to cover our actual cost, this fee is listed as varies to cover the cost of jersey. And now slide 4. The third group of fees pertains to the summer day camp program. These fees are proposed to better meet the needs of the participants and simplify the fee structure. Updated fees include regular care and extended care schedules, a sibling discount, late fee, and an additional camp shirt fee. The final proposed fees are for winter and spring camps, which would be offered during the school district breaks. There's a need for structured care for youth between the ages of 5 and 12 during these breaks from school. Staff is proposing to offer spring and winter camps at a fee which would be in alignment with the proposed summer camp fee. And now slide 5. In accordance with the citywide fee schedule, the public hearing was advertised twice in the San Gabriel Sun on April 9th and April 16th. And the council meeting agenda was posted in advance of the meeting at the 3 agenda posting locations. Staff recommends that the City Council approve Resolution 20-15, adopting the proposed fees and further amending the city's 2019-20 citywide fee schedule to reflect these changes. The new fees will become effective immediately upon passage of the resolution. This concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any clarifying questions from City Council to staff? Let me start with Councilmember Pu.
None for me, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Harrington,
Nothing for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Ding,
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Lau.
Oh, just quick question about the late fee. You know, it's $5 per 5 minutes. Can you explain that? It's kind of difficult. You know, you set up a time to pick up, and then 5 minutes late, you'll be fined for $5. That's what it says.
Yes, I'm not sure if you're still there.
I'm here.
Yes, but that $5 for 5 minutes. So basically, okay, so it's basically $1 per minute, and that is typical with our current late fees that we charge at our after-school programs.
Okay. And we don't, so far we haven't received any complaints about this late fee charge.
No, and I'll be honest, typically when it happens, once it's happened, it typically does not happen again. And that's kind of the goal of the late fee, is that we have a program that ends either, in this case, at 5:00 p.m. or at 6:00 p.m. And there are times where there are some parents that will try to take advantage of that and will pick their child up half an hour late. And we are then having to pay that staff for the additional time to be there as well. So that is the reason for charging the late fee.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And my question, Rebecca, is strictly on the concession stand rentals. Now that Pony isn't there, I'm just interested to learn what kind of groups have shown interest in using those concession stands. I'm assuming there's some club youth teams, maybe some adult teams. Can you just share a little bit about them?
So we do currently have a group that is a couple of different groups that are utilizing the field. Obviously that happened shortly before the whole change with COVID-19. So those groups only had a limited amount of time there at the field. But what we found with Pony having been there for as many years as they were there was that the concession stand was not really kept up. And we need to ensure that that space is kept up and maintained. And so that's the reason for initiating this. We do have a group that has initiated use at the field and likely would be interested, once they were able to have a real season, would be interested in being able to rent that concession stand as well. But we do want to have some kind of a fee schedule in place for that usage.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. So now I'll open the public hearing. Assistant City Clerk, can you please read any comments received?
We have not received any comments for this item.
Okay, so with that, I now close the public hearing. The time for public comment in this item is now closed. So now I'll begin with council deliberations or discussions. I'll start with Vice Mayor Lau.
Not at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Pu.
I don't have anything to add either. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Harrington.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Ding.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, would someone like to make a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Can I have a second?
I second.
So Assistant City Clerk Bonus, can you please take the vote?
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Pu,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Liao,
Aye.
Mayor Menchaca.
Aye.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Next item, please.
New business, item A, 2019-2020 mid-year report, revised due to COVID-19. Presentation will be made by Interim Finance Director Ken Louie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. Well, just 60 days ago, we were so excited to bring you a positive budget projection. We are looking at a positive 500,000, and in light of the fact that we had already had a $250,000 contingency fund set up, we were looking at approximately $750,000 to the good. That, coupled with the recently passed Measure SG, which would have brought another $3 million. With those three things, we were definitely on our way. Also, last year we finished a positive 750,000 as well. But then along came Mr. COVID at our front door. And so let's take a look at what the effects are going to be on this budget. Next slide, please. So, of course, the purpose of the mid-year report is to evaluate revenue expenditures versus the budget. It's not to do long-term forecasting. It's primarily to look at, hey, we budgeted X, where are we going to finish? Next slide, please. So last year, as a starting point, we figured we'd end the June 30, 2019 at a negative 1.8 million. That, coupled with our estimated revenues and our budget expenditures, we projected to improve our situation at a negative 1.7. Next slide, please. John, next slide, please. Or City Clerk. Thank you. So let's numbers. And I'll briefly only major issues are highlighted. Those items discussing, you can see the news are pretty much like we did. Certainly, our property tax will actually still have some growth. We'll need to increase that by 60,000. And of course, our two major hits due to COVID-19 are sales tax. We're going to be less than $500,000 as far as losing revenue. And that's kind of what we talked about earlier about the fact that we don't have a lot of big box or auto malls, a lot of big point of sales in town, that we primarily will gain our sales tax from the new county pool allocation. So yes, we'll be losing just under $500,000, but the losses aren't devastating as other cities are experiencing. Next, we have by far the biggest hit of all, our TOT. We'll be losing about $1.3 million in our TOT, and that by far is our biggest loss. And then going down, we do have some federal and state reimbursement money owed to us that we're not going to receive it this year, but we will likely receive it next year, giving us a total decrease in our estimated revenue of $1.8 million. Next slide, please. Now, on the expenditure side, what adjustments do you need to make? Well, I guess fortunately at this time, we'd have approximately 22 vacancies throughout the city, and that will net us conservatively about 726,000. We also will experience an overage in our human resources legal line item. That's going to be over about 48,000. And finally, the last major expenditure adjustment is in our election services. We didn't need to use, based on the format of elections, we did not need
Ken, I'm sorry, we're having
the
difficulty with the sound.
amount.
Ken? So we're having some difficulty with your sound. It's slowing down.
Returning that portion, which leads us to a total decrease in appropriations of 778,000, which is a favorable change. Oh, I'm sorry. What was the last thing you heard?
It was difficult to hear you. You're having some difficult problems with your sound.
Right?
Maybe Jonathan could help out.
Okay, John's here. I'm sorry, hold on.
I'm using John's phone now.
That's better.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard me say, basically?
Let's see. Why don't we just continue on with the reduction in revenues? And then you were
Okay.
going through your expenses. I think you were going to start the expenses.
Yes. Okay. John, if we can go back one slide to the revenues. So I'll touch on expenditures while he has it up. Basically, fortunately, at this time, we have about 22 citywide vacancies, which will help the general fund through the remainder of the year at approximately $726,000. That's a pretty conservative number. The actual savings might be greater than that. We also have an adjustment in the elections account for $100,000. Based on the format used for elections, the city clerk is returning $100,000. We should now go to slide 6, John.
I just want to remind people to put yourselves on mute because we can hear some sound in the background. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, John, if we can go to slide 6. I'm not sure if, John, you can hear me because I have your phone now. All right, let me yell down the hall. John, can you go to slide 6?
So
Thank you.
we're on hold for a moment.
Okay, no, we're good now. Sorry. Okay, so hey, so what are the impacts of all these changes of our revenue adjustments and our expenditure adjustments? Basically, when we factor the decrease in revenue of 1.8 and the decrease in appropriations, our net unfavorable change in the budget is $1,085,000. Now, when we add that net change to what we originally projected, our new projection due to COVID-19 is a negative 2.8 million. Now we still have the 200,000 plus contingency in the budget, so when we add that back, it'll be closer to 2.6 million. Next slide, John. Thank you. So moving forward, we're awaiting federal assistance with regard to COVID-19. We don't have a definite number or method what the amount of assistance is going to be, so we're waiting for that. A new concept also, we're just putting up for consideration, we're not necessarily advocating it, is potentially removing $1.5 million, which is city money that is currently on deposit with OPEB. That's the other post-employment benefit with the trustee. And that money is used to fund retiree health care. That's a step we don't want to take, but we would just tonight ask permission from council to allow the city manager to make that call at some point if we need to in the next 60 days or so. And then, of course, tonight, the next item we'll be considering is the refinance of the Public Works $7.8 million loan. Down the road, we have some future projects we want to look at, possibly a fee study, impact fee study that we can look at when things return to normal. Of course, on the positive side, for next year, we do have the impact of the sales tax measure, which was projected one time to generate $3 million to the city. Around the corner, we have our budget presentations, which we'll be picking up in the next couple of weeks. And then finally, hoping for a June budget adoption. Next slide, please. With that, I'll take any questions. And I do want to bring to light that we feel good. We're pretty deep into the budget, and we feel very good that despite everything going on, we will have a balanced budget for next year. So with that, I'll take any questions. Sorry about the sound tech difficulties.
That's okay, Ken. We're all trying to weather through these adjustments here. Okay, I'll now turn it to the council for any clarifying questions. So I will start with Vice Mayor Lau.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I was muted. But anyway, I have a question regarding the sales tax. Because we passed that measure SG, and when do we start taking that sales tax? Or when we, because it passed just right before this COVID-19 pandemic. So I don't think there's anything or very little from major SG.
Yes, we actually, it kind of works out kind of nice because that will be effective. We'll start receiving funds July 1st, kind of synced up with the fiscal year. So the projections that they originally stated should be fairly close. I mean, there'll be a drop off due to COVID-19, but as far as when the money comes out coming in, it'll be approximately July 1st in that quarter.
Okay. So yeah, as I understand, the hotels pretty much dropped to 90% of their occupancy rate, or even more. So I don't know. The number that you receive, is that an actual they reported? The TOT.
Yeah, the formula we used was, we said, hey, for our smaller hotels, let's figure 50% occupancy rate through the remainder of the year, because they tend to be less touristy, more of your locals. Whereas our heavy hitter hotels, we projected only 15% occupancy. So we were fairly conservative on that.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, for expenditure, I think we did very well for last election. I think for the past 2 elections, I believe the county is costing us about, $190,000. So I don't know, we budgeted, $300,000. That's a little bit high, but anyway, we have additional $100,000, which is good. The real serious problem, okay, is the PERP. And I don't know, because a year ago, we did not pay, we missed 1 year of payment. And then all of a sudden our liabilities, increased 23 millions. I just couldn't believe that. I kept asking that question. How do they figure, maybe they figure, for the term of 30 years or maybe longer. That's how they accumulate that $24 million. So if we're going to do this, okay, we're going to, I don't know if we're going to miss that 1.5 million. What will be the outcome? I don't want to see another jump for our OPET liabilities, but also, if we gonna borrow money from any lenders, and these are public information, and they can see that right away that we're missing payment. So that would hurt our credit. So I don't know if that's a good way to do. I'm just, bring this up. Maybe you can explain better for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand this at all.
Yeah, that's a very good question. The plan for that money, if council does bless the city manager being able to do that, and city manager does at some point do that, the plan is to not do it, but if need be, it would be to, one, improve the cash flow at June 30th, and to also kind of have in our back pocket for emergencies. You might remember that we're looking to refinance to get that big negative off of our financials at June 30th. And the negative was approximately 9 million. Well, if we refinance the 7.8 or 6.7, whatever's the remaining balance, there'll still be a little negative. And by bringing that cash back into the fold, into our coffers, we could hypothetically get back to zero, which the state would very highly look upon.
I see.
But the plan is not to use that for day-to-day expenditures by any means. As I said, we are planning to balance next year's budget.
Okay. So, well, as I understand, we're talking about the refinance for public works. There are 2 options, and we're not going to talk about that now, but for next agenda. But do we have enough time to do this, to turn around and won't show that we had debts for that 7.8 million? Because we don't want to show our credit report and or our budgets that we have that outstanding debts.
Well, we'll go into detail on the next item, but
Okay.
that is why we're advocating what we're advocating, because it's a shorter turnaround. It's not a full-blown bond proceeds with heavy cost of issuance. It's more of a short-term thing that we help us get this off our books at June 30th. And eventually we'll have a state audit, and we'd like to have that off our back, so to speak.
Right. So, I will, we will discuss that, for next agenda, but it's just by common sense, we have the money, why don't we just pay it off? Would that be another option?
Well, I'm sorry, let me interrupt. Just a reminder, we need to really focus on, these are strictly clarifying questions for this mid-year report. So if you can please just save that for the next agenda item.
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
All right,
please.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, because
we still have to
connects to that.
deliberate. We're just at clarifying.
Right, because it's in this agenda that staff is asking us withdrawal of the funds held in the OPEB trustee.
retirement. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
So it's connected. So I don't know. I don't have answer for that because I don't think it's a good idea. But
Okay. Well, let's say that for
others discuss it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Pu?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think I'd first like to clarify something that Vice Mayor Liao just said, Ken, if you don't mind, because my understanding with respect to the OPEB payment of last year is not that we didn't make it at all, simply that we did not prepay it as we had been in some previous years, or maybe Mark.
That's correct.
Okay, so
That's
we did
correct.
not.
You have your ongoing payments, and then you have like a kind of a pay down number. We didn't make the pay down number in layman's terms.
Okay, and so if you wouldn't mind clarifying for us on the council as well as to members of the public, then the net effect of that is simply that we are not, I guess, we're not amortizing that liability faster than would otherwise be the case, or faster than it would be on the sort of normal schedule.
Yes, because you have your regular payments that you pay throughout the year, and then you have X amount where you go to pay down in X amount of year, in Y amount of years. So yeah, to answer your question, we're not gaining ground, so to speak. We're only making our current year's liability, if you will.
Right. Okay. Well, good, because I just didn't want anybody to think that we were not making those payments at all. So let's see. My other questions relate to the drawing down from that OPEB trust. How quickly can that be done if we were to decide to do that?
I had a conversation with our rep a few days ago, and he said probably in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Basically, the holdup is not so much the paperwork, but they have to submit it to their board, which only meets once a month on the 15th. So if we time it right, that'll determine how fast we get it.
Once a month on the 15th. So they'll have 2 more meetings for the rest of this fiscal year, basically May 15th and June 15th.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think city manager is really looking to necessarily implement this, but I think he'd like to have the option, being there's a lot of unknowns, in the economy right now.
Absolutely. I understand the request here, but I think I'd still prefer to wait and see a little bit longer. There is the HR 6467, which our city manager Lazaretto had mentioned earlier, or some version of that same concept, which is direct aid to cities under 500,000 for lost revenue, which I'm still optimistic and hopeful that Congress will pass sometime between now and then. And also the refinancing of the public works facility loan, So those two variables, with those two variables still out there, I feel like it's a little bit too early as to sort of to bless this as an option, understanding that you're not asking for us to move forward and actually pull the trigger and doing it, but my position would be to hold off, since it seems the latest we would need to make this decision is sometime in late May, early June, and so we still have the luxury of a little bit of time before going through what would be, I think, a little bit more drastic step of drawing down from the OPEB trust.
Councilmember Pu, this is Mark. I have no problem at all delaying that request and not asking council to give that direction tonight. We can talk about that further in May as we talk about the budget for next year. And as you pointed out, any federal stimulus will hopefully be discussed by then. The only reason that I would push forward tonight would be if I was concerned about cash flow and if we needed actual cash, but that's not a concern for at least the next 60 days. So I have no problem at all just telling council that we can bring that back in May or early June for that request.
All right, thank you for that. And with respect to cash flow, I mean, wouldn't a more sort of ready source be withdrawing from LAIF, since a lot of our funds right now are invested in the local agency investment fund? How liquid is that? How quickly could we access that?
You can get LAIF dollars within 24 hours.
Okay, so we have numerous backstops here too with respect to cash flow, since that I'm just looking back now at the investment report. Looks like there's 10.6 million in the LAIF fund at the moment. Okay, those are my clarifying questions, and it's sort of like an initial sort of position out there with respect to the authorization request. But otherwise, I want to thank the staff for their hard work in putting this together. And there are a lot of unknowns. So even back in February, we were already talking about what kind of revenue shortfalls we'll be looking at. I guess I do actually have one final clarifying question, which is, if the actual results at the end of the fiscal year turn out to be even more negative than what we're anticipating here, how will, I guess, there's not really, is there anything that we need to do in terms of the approved budget for the 1920 fiscal year? I'm just thinking, because we're making these amendments now with this agenda item, but if the actuals turn out to be even more negative, or maybe they'll surprise to the upside, I'm somewhat skeptical that there'll be any surprise to the upside, but if there needs to be further adjustments, would we need to do this again before the end of the fiscal year?
I don't know if Mark wants to talk about, as far as the things that we're doing, so to speak, if Mark wants to talk about maybe a soft freeze on all of our vacant positions or some of our vacant positions. Mark?
Yeah, Councilman Pu, to answer your question, as far as if we needed to make further adjustments, I think what you were asking is, let's say revenue numbers like the TOT or sales tax turn out to be even worse than we hoped, or feared, excuse me, or things turn out better than we hoped. For the revenue side, we really don't need to do any adjustments to the budget, because that's just a strictly budgeted item, and we receive all of that revenue, whether it's more or less, for each of those items that were approved. The real meat is the expenditure side. So when we're trying to get either further expenditure authority or to move money from one fund to the other, the biggest part of this tonight is just to do all of this in public. So we're giving our best guesstimate as to the mid-year. But to answer your question, no. If it turns out in May or early June that we do a lot better revenue-wise or worse revenue-wise, we do not need to do any further adjustments. We'll end the year wherever we end the year. As Ken was saying, we are looking at every possible way to save money for the rest of the fiscal year. We have instituted a soft hiring freeze where we're not bringing anybody new on board unless it's an actual frontline person or a public safety person. And we are looking, we've already put a freeze for the last 2 months. It sounds kind of silly to say now, but even before we were not allowed to travel, we stopped a month before. We stopped all of our travel and conferences, knowing that we needed to save as much money as possible. So we're doing everything we can to save money over the next 2 months, but we don't need to come to council for any further authorization or adjustment to that.
Okay, understood. Thanks very much. And again, thanks for your hard work. I mean, even I think in February, we could anticipate that this drop in revenue, especially in sales and transient occupancy tax. And, I think it's going to make projections of revenue for next fiscal year difficult as well. So, I just want to commend the staff for putting together some hard numbers in a situation where there's significant uncertainty. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Harrington,
Thank you, Mayor.
clarifying questions?
Yeah, so thank you. Also thank Ken for the report. Don't like the content, but I'm glad that we have everything here. I did have a question. I want to just clarify quickly my understanding. So the sales tax measure SG, we won't see that basically until next fiscal year. So that's why the numbers are here like this.
We will see that, assuming COVID didn't exist, we would get the full slate pretty effective immediately in the new fiscal year.
Okay, yeah, that's what I want to confirm, but it's usually in arrears, right? So they've already collected it and then they release it to us?
Yeah, they're usually like a quarter and a half behind.
Okay, perfect. So we just don't know, we don't have a
Just kind of
projection.
syncs up. Just kind of syncs up nicely. We get our projections from HDL. As a matter of fact, we talked to HDL today, and what I quoted you in the report is still a good number for this year.
Okay.
And we'll get our next year's number from them as well.
Perfect, thank you. And then the other question that I had is regarding the next item anyway, so I'll just hold off until we go to the next item, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Dane, do you have any questions? Clarifying
Yes, okay.
questions.
Yeah, right now, just talking about current budgets from I want to just clarify, it's from the last year, 2019, July 1st until June 30, right?
Yeah.
That's the fiscal year. Okay. So, right, because this pandemic, so you proposal to the estimate maybe need that's want us discuss the change the budget. Is that right? For the next, I think should be from like February. I think is February to like until June, because we have a lot of the sales tax and TOT. That's I think that's is it like a hotel tax?
Yes, we have a 12% TOT in the city, transit occupancy tax.
All right. So you, okay. My question: how do you get this kind of estimate? Is it based on like February and March estimate?
For the sales tax?
Yeah, sales tax and the TOT. Yeah.
The sales tax, as well as some of the other taxes in the city, are calculated by a third party HDL, a third party consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a formula to pretty accurately calculate the sales tax. So we get it directly from them. That's a paid service. As far as the TOT, our hotels report to us quarterly, and we're in communication with them, and we get a good idea of what the projections are from them based on what they report to us.
Okay. Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
Okay, are you done, Councilmember?
Yeah, and also, yeah,
Oh,
I know more
I
my
guess you're not
question.
done.
I wanted to know because the federal, state, and the reimbursement. Previous budget like 400,000. Right now it's reduced to the 140,000. I don't know what
Yes.
that means. Yeah.
Basically, for mutual aid, oftentimes like our fire folks will go out and fight a fire, and at some point they'll submit for a request either from other cities or from federal government. But a lot of times the timing is off. They might perform the duties in one fiscal year but not get paid for a year and a half. So we projected, I think, 400,000, but only 200,000 came in. But we'll likely get that next year. So we eventually get it, but it doesn't always. It's not very timely. It's not a very timely reimbursement.
Okay. Okay. And one more question. It's regarding the MSG. Where I saw we passed the. So when is this sales tax effective? The new sales tax.
The sales tax, yes. We'll start seeing the positive effects from it July 1st and after that.
So actually, the MSG is not effective while our current the sales tax effect estimate.
No, it doesn't help us this year. It's just the timing of it. It doesn't help us this year.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Ding. I'm going to defer my questions to the deliberation part of this agenda item. So at this time, I'd like to announce that the time for public comment on this item is now closed. Assistant City Clerk, please read any comments received.
Mayor, I haven't received any comments for this item.
Okay, so then at this time, we'll start the council deliberation for this item. I will begin. I like to, there's two recommended actions, and I like to separate them because they're very distinct. And I think Councilmember Pu actually already alluded to it. My comments for the deliberation part is that I know I prefer that we table item recommendation number 2, the drawdown of funds. I would hate to worsen the retirement liability in any way to cover the projected shortfalls with so much unknown still. I think I'm even more optimistic because not only should we be waiting for any COVID bills relating to the federal, but I am hoping maybe it's something through the state, even the county. There might be some funding that's coming to backfill that negative million plus that we're going to have. So I'd like to hold off on drawing down the funds. I know when we have our May meeting to discuss, I believe, Mark, we're going to have a special meeting just to discuss the budget. I think at that time, our staff will be bringing a menu of options, ways that we can increase revenue streams, ways we can reduce expenses, and we can include this as one of the options. I also would like to, let's see, what else is there? Well, anyway, but I do approve, I would like to move forward after the council, we all go through our deliberations and discussions. I do believe we need to adopt this resolution, but I like to table the drawing of the funds. So that's my comments for now. So let's start with, for the deliberations, with Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with your second comment. Obviously, the first, we should separate these. But the drawdown of funds is something, I've been, anyone that's been here long enough knows I've been harping on benefits and OPEB for a very long time. And I think Jason will attest to this. It's been a pretty, I would say, I almost sound like the sky is falling half the time I talk about this. Once we take money out of these funds, it's not coming back. We're not going to be able to fund it. And then we will have kind of created a much worse long-term problem in a short-term solution. And it'll make our short-term in the future much worse. So we really do have to think long-term, because you realize these funds invest on a 30-year horizon. They amortize things over 20 years. So if you think of just that fact, they're amortizing something on a 20-year basis when they're a 30-year investor. So they are thinking long-term. So we need to keep that in mind and not panic. Yes, we're going to be very lean. Yes, we're going to be very tight, but it's better to be lean now and then be in a better position a year from now or 2 years from now. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. So thank you. Other than that, I think the discussion or the clarifying questions pretty much brought out everything. I don't really have a whole lot of discussion to add. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. Let's see, Vice Mayor Lau.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I totally agree because, we can't approve this resolution 20-09 for the adjustments, even though, future, I guess, maybe by May, middle of May, we will see a different number, but still, we can do something right now for cash flow purpose. But regarding that drawdown funds from PERS or OPAT, I totally disagree. We just don't touch that. Because especially if we are going to do a refinance for our loan for a public works yard, I think we have to do something that to keep our credits in good condition. So I would approve the motion to approve the first one, but not the second one for Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ding. Any further questions or discussion?
Yeah, actually, for first one, it's for me okay. But second one is the same thing. It's why we should have to draw down from this employer retirement benefit trust. So if we can find something else, maybe even right now, I think it's the most refinance the interest rates drop. So maybe we can figure out refinance the whatever we already have the loan, so can reduce the interest rate. Maybe it can help for the future budget. Okay, I write that right now. Make a decision. It's maybe postpone to the May with more detailed discussion.
Thank you for your
Thank you,
comments.
Mayor.
Okay, and lastly, Councilmember Pu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with my colleagues, and I think we are all in agreement, and be ready to move forward with the motion if it's welcome.
Okay, you'd like to move to adopt?
Yeah, I'd like to move approval of recommended action number 1 only.
Do I have a
second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, great. Vice Mayor Lau. Okay, so let's take a vote on that motion, and let's just take a motion. Let's take a vote on that motion first. So Assistant Clerk Bonus, please take the vote.
Councilmember Ding,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Pu,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Liao,
Aye.
Mayor Menchaca.
Aye.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-1 or 5-0.
Thank you. So at this point, I just want to clarify. So do this recommended action number 2, does that just, do we have to not proceed so it automatically doesn't pass, or what's the process? Because it is on the agenda.
Yeah, if you take no action on it, then it's gone.
Okay, so we've taken no action.
You took the action you took, and it didn't include that recommendation.
Okay, so that's enough. Okay, great. So let's move on. Next item, please.
Item B, refinancing of public works loan. Presentation will be made by Interim Finance Director Ken Louie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. You'll recall that in 2014, the city was in need of funding for a public works facility. At that time, the general fund agreed to a 10-year loan at 1.6% with Citizens Business Bank. The loan, even today, is still payable by the general fund. At the same time, the city agreed to deposit as collateral $7.8 million into a CD at 0.6%. The CD matures in 2025 and the loan matures the next day in 2025 as well. Now, the tricky part is the general fund is on the hook for the loan, but the loan is supported and collateralized by funds primarily made up of special funds. Now, you'll recall also that more recently, the city has a negative $1.8 million in cash as of June 30, 2019. And as I mentioned, the general fund also has the burden of the loan, the $7.8 million loan. So the combination of those two is causing a negative $8.3 million on the city's financials. So with that in mind, over the past several months, the city's been looking to refinance this loan. It's not so much that the interest rate is high on the loan, it's that the loan will have a balloon payment due in about 4 years, several $1 million. And also we want to take advantage of the low interest rates at this time. So the city was approached by Raymond James, as well as a representative from Nixon Peabody, and they made two proposals. The first proposal, sorry, next slide, please. The first proposal was option one, and that's more of a full-blown lease revenue bond. The positive with doing a full bond is it's possible to get a lower interest rate, but there's a very volatile market out there, so that's even questionable at best. The negatives at this time to doing a full bond is we'll incur considerable costs in developing an official statement. And the official statement is kind of like your marketing brochure to investors. There will also be continued disclosure, which is like from years and years after the bond, you have to supply information. We would have to obtain a bond rating, market the bonds, and we figured that the cost of issuance would be about $250,000. Also, a full bond sale is a lengthy process. And if we were to go that route, we would not be able to get this big negative off our books at June 30th. The second option, which they recommend, is called private placement financing. The good thing is it doesn't require credit rating, it doesn't require an official statement or public offering or continuing disclosure. It's a much shorter process, usually about 45 days, which will allow us greater flexibility to kind of tailor to our cash flow needs. And best of all, the cost of issuance would be half of that, about $123,000. So, and also the good thing is we'd be able to, if we time this up right, we'd be able to get this off the books at June 30th. So someday when we get our state audit, it would be off the books at June 30th. Now the only con would be you might not get the best rate, but you're likely to get a better structure that would relate to what our cash needs are. Next slide, please. So our plan of action, our recommendation is to obviously refinance the loan immediately due to low rates, the impact on our financial statements, and of course, again, we have a big balloon payment coming up in 2025. We would ask council permission to continue negotiating with Raymond James, the public finance company, as well as Nixon Peabody, the bond counsel that they work with respect to option two, private placement. And however, we will not formally agree to anything until we bring it back to city council for their approval. But this is kind of a very timely issue. We'd really like to get this process in the next 45 days or so. Next slide. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Madam Mayor, may I make a couple of comments before the council asks questions?
Yes,
Thank you very much. So I wanted to add just three things to what Ken has said, just because there are some questions that have come up over the last couple of years. And first of all, one of them is, why did we do this scenario of having a CD that was the same amount as the loan amount? And why didn't we just pay that amount if we had that cash in the bank? And Paula Chamberlain, when she was here, did the research and went back to the time period that we actually built that facility. And she came to the conclusion that at the time that we issued the CD and had the loan, we did not have enough funds in our general fund at that time to do the actual building and paying for that. So even though we had the cash as a city, the cash was not all in the general fund. It was in the other funds that we're currently using still to borrow from. So things like the developer impact fee fund, the sewer fund was not around at that time, but there were other funds that were available for borrowing from. So basically we gave ourselves a loan internally and then collateralized that with a CD. So at that time, we could not have just paid for that with cash because we didn't have general fund cash at that time of the amount to finish the project or to complete the project. The second thing I wanted to point out is we as a city are not able to do a typical financial transaction like a homeowner would be or a business owner. We can't just go put a deed of trust on that property and get a 30-year loan. And so we're bringing a more complicated transaction to the council for consideration. And I just wanted to explain a little bit what a lease revenue bond is. And it's going to make this all more confusing, but in the end, it ends up, if it goes through and if the council approves of it, it ends up putting us in a better position with our bottom line. And since we're not able to do a traditional mortgage with a deed of trust, a bank needs some collateral for lending us the money. And so the way they do that is we lease them the property and then they lease it back to us. We lease it to them for a 20-year period. They give us all of that money up front to have control of the property for 20 years. And then we turn around and make monthly or yearly or whatever we end up doing lease payments to them. So it's a way for them to do long-term financing and to give us cash over that period of time. We end up always controlling the property. We end up having possession of it. We are responsible for all the maintenance and everything else. If we were to default, technically they could take that property and lease it to somebody else. But there would have to be quite a few things that would happen before we would default on that loan, as you all know. But it is a complicated way, but cities do that all the time, and cities build projects with that. I don't know why we didn't use a transaction like that in the beginning. The only thing I can think of in my discussions with Mitchell Ng from Citizens Business Bank is the loan was very cheap that we got. About $900 is all it cost us for origination, and then the interest rate was great. On the flip side, our funds that we're borrowing from are not getting the interest that they should be receiving from LAIF or our other investment accounts because that CD is only earning 0.6%. So that's why we're looking at this as a way to take our CAFR bottom line from almost $9 million of negative in the general fund and trying to get that burden from the general fund and then to free up cash in those other funds so that we can spend them the way that they're designed to be spent, like fixing the impacts from development. So with that, Ken and I stand ready to answer any questions that the council have. This is not intended to be something that you're approving tonight for a go-ahead for the final. You'll see all of the documents and we'll have the consultants on the call, or hopefully we're doing it in person by the time we are ready to consummate the transaction. And council can see everything and ask questions again at that time. So we're not looking for you to bless this tonight with anything but a thumbs up or a thumbs down to keep going or to not keep going. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So we'll start with clarifying questions before we ask the city clerk for any public comment. So let's start with Councilmember Ding.
So I still not the required understanding for the, I think, thank you, Mark, you explained the option 1. But option 2, what's the, I still don't really understand it. Will be get a more lower interest rate or?
Yeah, the
So
way
the
private
difference-
placement works.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the way private placement works is the representative from Raymond James will kind of represent both sides of the city and investors. And what he'll do is he'll explain to investors what type of investment we're looking at and our cash flow needs, and he'll get a short list of bank investors that are willing to work with us and structure a deal with us. as opposed to having to do a bond issue and kind of go out to the market. I feel this one's a lot better because we're only talking about 6.5 million. We shouldn't have to go out to Wall Street and do a presentation and get a bond rating and official statement. The dollar amount's not that large. So private placement is working with a select list of banks and basically financing it through them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it? Great. Councilmember Harrington.
Sorry about that. I was on the, I had my mic muted. So I wanted to understand, Mark, I know we've discussed this several times, the 8.3 million that is basically on paper right now. It's obligated. That's the reason that when the state comes in and audits us, they say, hey, this money is obligated to pay off a loan, so you can't use it as an asset. We're treating it as a liability rather than an asset. Correct?
That's correct. And it's only on paper for one day out of the year. We take a loan on June the 30th when we close out our books and we borrow from the other funds. And then on July the 1st, we reverse that transaction so the other funds then are able to collect interest from that CD.
Okay, so I think this goes to my next question. Have we discussed this with Citizens Bank? How, if there's any room to renegotiate how this is structured or anything like that, or have we just left it open to the market and just said, hey, we're just going to go to the market?
No, we talked to Citizens Business Bank and they've been actually very helpful. They have, we offered them first to see if there were ways, if we could do a traditional loan or if they had other methods, if they could be the bank that would do the lease back financing, and they said they could not. But the one thing that they have been very helpful on, and we will take advantage of this no matter what, is they've worked with their, gone all the way up to the CEO's office, and they have gotten approval to release the amount of the CD that is over the amount of the loan balance. That's supposed to reset at the end of the 10-year term, which comes up in 2025. And at that point, we'd be able to pull out any cash that is over the amount of the collateral needed. But in order to help us out in the interim, they are saying that we can pull about $1.5 million out of that because our loan balance is about $6.5 million, and the 7.8 was approximately the amount that we borrowed. So by the end of the year, it'll be about $1.5 million that they will allow us to pull out of that CD with no penalty. So they have been very, very helpful and want to help us, but aren't able to.
Okay, so then I guess that gets to my question regarding the last item. Was that included in the last item, their offer of the 1.5 million?
No, it was not.
Could you?
Actually, these could be for Ken too. So
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I couldn't hear the question.
So the 1.5 million the Citizens Business Bank is going to take off of basically the CDs we have over the outstanding principal amount. They would basically just let us cash those out, but that was not included in the previous item.
That's correct.
No, there's
That
no
was
relation.
not included in
No
the-
relation at all.
Yeah, well, it's not related. I mean, it wasn't included. So that's 1.5 million because that was about the same amount on the OPEB we were looking at. So right there would be 1.5 million we could put towards the balance sheet. In other words, that's what I'm getting at. It's a balance sheet item.
You're right,
correct.
but when we're talking about the amount for the 1.5 million, we're talking about what we think is our negative fund balance, which will be about $2.8 million versus
yeah,
okay, versus the entire $9 million when we add in the loan.
Yeah, correct. So then regarding this transaction, it looks like there's, so I want to understand the $123,000. What is that? Is that a payment to the placement agent? Is that to the attorneys? Is that bond counsel? What are we talking for that $123,000?
They have forwarded us a list, and I can get that to council. Basically, that's $35,000 for the underwriter, $40,000 for bond counsel, $20,000 for the placement bank counsel, and so forth. The total is $123,000. So those are your traditional cost of issuance costs.
It's like an origination fee.
Basically.
So on that, is there a reason we have to use a placement agent? That's not something the city can do directly? Because 2% is I mean, it's a lot of money right now.
Wow, these are really highly technical investments. I personally wouldn't have the knowledge to do these, and I wouldn't know if it'd be worth any kind of liability or any kind of that go wrong. So why you kind of want to use like a placement agent, something like this.
Oh, I know. I deal with them every single day at work. That's one of the things I do is the
Yeah.
financial study. So I know who these people are. I know what they actually do, and they really do just keep a stable of people they can borrow money from quickly. And they have a set parameter, and that's why they're agents, and then they get a pretty good fee from this. So we're basically once again thinking, oh, we can get this off by June, and it's going to be great. But then we're thinking short term again, because I was thinking if we could save 2% in origination fees, and I know we're gonna have to pay something, but the placement agent and the bond agent and the lawyers and they're gonna be taking quite a bit of money. So yeah, on paper it'll be bad, but if it's like 3 months later and we save 100,000, let's say, or even 80,000, it might be worth it. So I was just thinking when we bring it back, we might want to consider an option of the city doing it directly, and that's just for the council. And if technically, if we're not able to do it, I understand it is complex. It's not something we do all the time, but it might just be as simple as hiring a consultant to say, hey, or even talk to other cities. Have you done this? And say, what bank did you work with? As a lot of times the banks will walk you through it as well. Some banks don't use placement agents, so there might be great banks out there that we haven't talked to. They just don't do it as a matter of policy. And so for example, I'll tell you, we invest a lot where I work, and we will not use placement agents for a lot of transactions simply because it does increase the cost significantly. And that kind of ties into, you already answered my next question. So do you have an idea, Ken, of the expected rate we would be looking at if we threw this to the market? Are we looking
No,
at
we've asked
4%,
them. They haven't given us a quote yet. They don't feel comfortable giving a quote until you've actually got some of the official submissions from the different banks. But yeah, as you know, rates are pretty low right now. I think personally, I'm more concerned about refinancing this before the balloon payment around the corner in 4 or 5 years. That's like a $5.3 million balloon payment. I mean, whether or not it ends up on
that's my biggest concern too. That's why I'm saying June to
Yeah.
me isn't. I know it'd be great to not have this on next year's CAFR. It's great for the audit. There's a lot of reasons why June would make a lot of sense. But at the same time, if it really is only on paper and we're spending 100,000 to get something off our books on paper, but we're not really in the totality, we're not really saving in the long run. We may even be, we're rushing through it. I just think I would like kind of an analysis of what is the fiscal impact of doing it by June versus doing it, let's say if we ended up getting it in December, and we did it ourselves, we might be able to save 50 grand, 80 grand, or whatever it is. So I'd really like to look at that. Okay.
We're definitely going to pay more because we're only paying 1.6% interest right now to Citizens Bank. So
I know the interest rate will definitely be higher. Definitely. I'm not talking about interest rate. I'm talking overall costs of so let's say opportunity costs of the transaction itself. I don't think the placement agents are going to save us a ton of interest. They're going to give us they're going to have a stable of banks, and those banks some of them will be willing, actually probably a lot of them will be willing to deal with this directly. And then there's banks that they wouldn't have in their stable that would probably be willing to do this directly, where it really is just a lease back. That's really what it is. And then I understand the transaction. I understand real estate transactions actually pretty well. So I think, and a lot of times when you rush into a decision, you're not always getting the best results. And then as far as if we do pay off Citizens Bank, are there any prepayment penalties for any of the CDs? Like say we're catching them early, or I recall there wasn't, but I just want to get confirmation of that.
No, there are not.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought, because I remember when we did that, the council said we don't want prepayment penalties on anything, because we were actually thinking at the time we may be in a different financial position in the future, so we may want to refinance. So that's always been in the council's back pocket. We may want to refinance this. How we went about it obviously depended on our financial situation. But I remember when we did this transaction, we were offered 5 or 6 different routes, and this was the one that made the most sense at the time. I think Mark stated those reasons.
I have to clarify, Councilman Harrington, one thing that Ken said, there's no prepayment penalty on the loan. We do forfeit an interest payment on the CD for the amount that we would have earned over the remainder of the period. So not a prepayment penalty, but a prepayment of that interest. So there is a small hit.
Yeah, I understand the CDs. I was just making sure there was no penalties, because sometimes the CDs actually have penalties in addition to your lost interest.
Right.
I just make sure of that. I'm not worried about lost interest. I mean, obviously it'd be greater to have it, but if we don't, that's fine. I'm fine. So I'm not saying that I'm against this transaction at all. I'm just saying I want to do it methodically and make sure we really thought out all the possibilities. Just keep that in mind since it's coming back to us. And then as far as, I want to get clarifications, because I think I've heard this several times. Why don't we have the money, why don't we just pay it off? And I recollect that these, as we discussed, these are not all general funds. So we can't just pull from all these funds to pay off the Public Works Center. We don't have that kind of cash. We can't intermingle these funds, and some of them. So yes, we're using them as a security technically, but we're not transferring them. We're not pushing them in between the general fund. They literally are, yeah, they could be invested at a better rate, so they're tied up, but technically they're keeping their lane. Let's put it that way. And we can't, for example, we can't use sewer funds to do some of this. Our sewer funds are dedicated. We can't do that. So some of these things that we're just depositing our money, it's not available for that. So I just want to make sure we're clear about that. We can't, no matter what, we could, even if we wanted to, we couldn't just pay this loan off with the quote unquote security that we put in place. That's just not viable. So I just want to make sure that was still my understanding, that it's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Because hypothetically, if the bank were to say, hey, you know what, we're going to let you guys out of your CD, we're going to break the CD and give you all your cash back, it wouldn't help the general fund. It's not the general fund money. It would just get returned to our main checking account.
Yeah, and that money has to be going into the fund that was used as a security, because that really is, if we ever failed to make a payment, they have security and they have to show that. But I just want to, that's why I wanted to clarify. These are not all of a sudden we're gonna be flush with cash. So I don't want to get people with that mindset. And that's the end of my comments. That was more of a statement, but so it is council deliberation. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Lau, clarifying questions?
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. So yeah, I remember we have the CDs, $10 million for, I don't know, 20 years. So it's always with certain banks, earning very low interest. So we do have those cash. But I have a question. When we borrow money from Citizen Business Bank, is directly, is that a violation of the California Constitution? Because the cities are not supposed to borrow money, just like homes, you want to mortgage your home. So how did we do it, without the violation? Anyone knows?
I'll defer to the attorney on that.
Oh,
I'm not sure I understand the comment about not borrowing money. We have to have a balanced budget.
well, okay, that's fine, because it's already said and done, and we're discussing this option 1. If it's the public sales of lease revenue bonds, I would think, for a new project, like we're going to build a police headquarters, and, that will be the most ideal. Or if we're going to build a new fire station, then yeah, that's another thing that we can use that lease revenue bond. But right now we're just refi. We refinance 6.5 million. It's not a whole lot of money, but the problem I see is it's a time. We're in middle, well, later than middle April. And by June 30th, we got to have a lender committed to give us the money for 6.5 million. So it's not an easy job. I sometimes I think, well, why don't we just go and send out RFP and ask for banks and see if they're interested? I think this is a very specialized business. Not we can just go to the banks and say, hey, we want to borrow money right now. Right now is terrible timing, but I remember May 15 is the board meeting for, I remember Ken mentioned something like that. So May 15, we have some kind of certainties from the financial institutions, and maybe by the time we can find out if there's a bank that willing to lend, to give us the money, but without, I think we need to hire the placement agent and also some kind of bond counsel to help us to pull through this. Even we hire them, I don't think there's really a guarantee that within such a short time they can find us a bank that is willing to lend us money. So we have to look hard. Okay, that's the way I see it. We gotta hire someone that knows this kind of business, and at the meantime, maybe we can just ask around our neighboring cities if they have done anything like that, and if they have any good relationship with certain banks, and we can do this by June 30th. And another issue, because this is sort of, I don't think it's a hard money, but it's a short term, not short term, it's a short, we don't have too much time to find the money. So especially this volatile financial situation. So if we can find a bank that willing to do it, and they're probably going to charge us much higher interest rate. So, we have to talk about how high is the interest rate that we can afford. Okay, that's something maybe, we can discuss later and just say, well, we have to try what's out there first and then see, well, if there's only one bank that willing to give us money at maybe 7% interest, that's not uncommon, but during difficult times. But are we going to accept that? See, that's the thing. So, yeah, for this I would agree with the staff report. We need to hire Raymond James and Nixon Peabody to help us to find the lender. So that's my comment.
Okay, just a reminder, this is strictly clarifying questions, but
yeah,
we'll keep that in mind for the next part. Okay, Councilmember Pu?
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to some of the questions that Councilmember Harrington made, I guess in the previous discussion meaning in the discussion on the previous agenda item, Mark, you had mentioned, cash flow and liquidity, the potential cash flow and liquidity issues. If we do not refinance this loan before the end of this fiscal year, would we run into those cash flow and liquidity issue problems?
Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would not. We have been watching that on a daily basis. Ken and I talk weekly, and we are not concerned about our cash flow through the end of the year. So no, the two issues were, one, for the audit, trying to get it off the books for the audit purposes. And then two, but probably the bigger issue, was trying to take advantage of low interest rates. And remember, we started this before the COVID-19 hit, and interest rates and that environment looked like it was going to be perfect. So that was the speed. Half of it was to get it off the books, but the other half was the speed was trying to get low interest rates while they were available.
That's correct. It's about posterity. It's about posterity in the face of the state, as well as, again, the balloon payment coming up down the road.
With respect to the 123,000 in costs, would we need, if we were to move forward with the recommended action at this point, would we need to pay any amount in retainer right now?
We would not. They work 100% on contingency. We could take it right up to the point of signing documents and then decide not to, and we're not on the hook for anything, which is why I asked them to work, because we're not on the hook for anything.
Right. And just to clarify, I think as Councilmember Ding had also asked, Mark, when you had previously talked about the lease revenue bond, that's essentially what option 1 is, if I'm not mistaken. Option 2, the private placement, we're still talking about a leaseback, right? It's just happens to be just with either a investor or a sort of syndication of lenders or investors who would be doing the same structure minus going to the bond market to actually securitize the obligations. Is that accurate?
100% accurate.
Okay. Let's see here. Look at the presentation. And the other additional detail you added that, I guess what I wanted to do also is provide a brief history lesson, if I might. When we did this transaction, what we were told by our then finance director, Tom Marston, is that there was no other way of being able to finance the public works facility. We didn't have the general fund cash to be able to do it. And that's why the funds that are in that CD are actually made up of a whole bunch of other, money from a whole bunch of other funds. He, at that time, represented to us that there was no other way, there's basically no other way of financing the public works facility. Even though we objected at that time, I remember I objected strenuously that as soon as we make any payment on this loan, the loan would be over collateralized. And that's the situation we find ourselves in now, too, where the loan balance is now 6.5, I think, 6.4 million, whereas the collateral is 7.8. So this is leading up to a clarifying question, but I wanted to provide that as background. We don't have the cash just to be able to pay it off. And the reason why at that time, it was represented to us that there was no other way of being able to do this deal, to basically get the public works facility built. And then therefore that was also holding up the, construction of the new police station. So it was almost presented to us as a take it or leave it ultimatum. So now, 2 questions. First question is with respect to the the $1.4 million of over collateralization. You mentioned that if we were to do this refinancing, there's not a prepayment penalty on the loan, but there would be we would have to still pay the interest that Citizens Business Bank would have earned through the end of the CD. Would that be true with respect to the 1.4 million over collateralization that you represent, that you just said Citizens Business Bank would allow us to do, regardless of the refinancing portion?
I don't believe so, Councilman Pu. I just had that conversation with Mitchell Ng this morning, and he offered that up. My understanding is no, that there would be no strings attached or no penalty on that. but I'll have to have a further conversation with him before I can give you an unequivocal answer.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, then, in a conversation so far with Nixon Peabody and what's the other firm?
Raymond James.
Yeah, Raymond James. Excuse me. Do they feel optimistic that we would at this point be able to attract investors and lenders to be able to do this, the lease-back transaction?
Well, I had a conversation with them today, and initially Mark and I asked for them to look at some numbers, doing a 20-year, because we figured the 20-year would generate annual payments, what we're kind of accustomed to now with our current loan payment. And they reached out to 5 different banks, and most of them said, no thanks. You know, we see they might have tourism issues, you know, TOT down, and their recent CAFRs, the financials look bad, negative the last 2 years. No thanks. 4 of the 5 said they're not interested. So then we asked them to go back and look at maybe doing a 15-year shorter term, and a few of them showed that they would have interest now under a shorter term. So we internally at the city, we know we've turned things around, that we're definitely on the way back and things are going to turn around. But on paper, we're definitely not the belle of the ball. I mean, we don't look good on paper. So we can't be too choosy. I respect what Councilman Harrington's saying about we got to watch our costs in this, but we can't be overly choosy because we don't look as good on paper.
And is there any sense of striking while the iron is hot? Do either of you, Mark or Ken, feel that there is only a certain, like, we've already done a lot of preparatory work for this, and you've already had many conversations with the bond counsel and the placement agent. I'm worried that there's only a certain window of opportunity here to be able to take advantage of this. Not that it couldn't be done, next year or prior to the balloon payment that is due in 2025, but I would, in some sense, it drives the decision as to whether or not to move forward now within the current fiscal year versus, say, waiting 6 months.
Councilman Pu, your question, the answer I'll give is, I think, kind of answers some of Councilman Harrington's concerns at the same time as answering your question. First of all, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to lock ourselves into anything. We can continue having a conversation with these banks and come back with a rate. And if we like the rate, and at that point, we can make the determination of whether we need to strike while the iron is hot, and pull the trigger, so to speak, on that transaction. But Councilman Harrington's question about the costs, one of the reasons why we're bringing this to you now is because Ken and I reached out to folks that we have worked with in the past. Well, Ken has. I've heard of Danny Kim. I've not worked with him, but Ken has worked with him, and I have colleagues that have worked with him. And we asked, what can you do for us to help us out? And these are the numbers that he came back with. The other option is, if we get back an interest rate and a proposal that we don't think is worth striking now, and we want to look at this more carefully, we can go and do an RFP for people to help, and we can either propose what our cost would be for a placement agent or for bond counsel, or we can have them compete against each other, and we can have help at the best help at the best price. But then we're taking the risks that in 6 months, interest rates could be completely different than they are now. So I don't think we need to make that decision tonight. I think we can make that decision when we get an interest rate proposal back, and then we can decide if it's too good to pass up, and we can solve several problems with one transaction, or if we want to be more careful and look at this in a more long-term approach.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mark and Ken, and thanks, Denise. Or thanks, Mayor Menchaca.
Okay, thank you. And well, most of my questions have been answered. I just wanted to clarify that the city, we've never had public bonds. Is that correct? We've never entered into anything like that.
We have not.
Oh, okay. So if we did, if we would even consider option one, That would be new territory too. Let's see. I'll ask the rest of the questions during deliberation. So at this time, the public comment on this item is now closed. Assistant City Clerk, please read any comments that you might have received.
Mayor, we have not received any comments for this item.
Okay, now we'll go into deliberation and further discussion. So let's just start with Councilmember Harrington.
Mayor, I believe that if we do proceed with this, I mean, I think it's a good idea to always pursue in finance if there's a better option. So I would wholeheartedly agree with Mark. I mean, placement agents don't charge until they have a deal in place because they get cut off the back end from whoever they place. So you're going to necessarily get a list of the people they have in their bullpen. And that's why I kind of wanted to say, if you RFP'd it, you could actually deal with 5 placement agents at the same time. So I can tell you, so when I deal with placement agents, I actually do that. I'll have 3 or 4 or 5 different placement agents looking for the terms that I want, and I dictate the terms to them, and they find, and the first one that comes to me with the terms that I want, that's who I use. So yeah, it's great to have a placement agent if you have no contacts whatsoever, but we are a municipality. It's not like we're Joe Blow out of nowhere. People know who San Gabriel is, and if we wanted to go get a loan, we could literally pick up a phone book and call banks. It takes manpower and it takes a little bit of time, but you're also saving in the long run. You're not going to get a hugely different rate. The banks are all competitive. Believe me, there's a lot of cash out there, no matter what I want to say, and it's all chasing secure investments, especially now with the way the stock market is. They want long-term secure investments, and this is exactly that. A lease back from a city is probably about as secure as you can get. No matter what happens in the long run, eventually we're going to be paying this. Even if we miss a payment, let's say, or cities go through rough spots, they almost always recover, or someone steps in like the state, or someone steps in and we get a different loan, and then these obligations get paid off. That's why I like to be deliberate. We as a city should never be in a rush to do something other than put out a fire. I mean, that's who should be rushing, fire and police. Everyone else should be deliberative. So I would say striking while the iron hot is great, but the interest rates have been historically low 5 years now, 6 years. I mean, they've gone up a little bit, gone down. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of cash out there. So I would just say, let's sit back and I would go with option 2. And I would say, let's also expand that. Let's not be limited to that. We could talk with another placement agent. We could talk with banks directly. There's a lot of sources of finance out there. So, and I don't think that we're going to lose out. Like, if the interest rates go up, it's not going to be 2 points. We haven't seen a 2-point swing in 30 years. It's going to be a quarter point at a time. So yeah, over the long term, we may miss out on a quarter point here, maybe 1/8 of a point. But if we're saving on the front end, it's worth it. So that's why I just want to say, let's do it deliberately, and let's have more than one option as far as placement agents. And then I don't know this legally for municipalities. I know for pension funds, but on our pension fund disclosures, are they going to be telling us if they're going to get more of a piece of this than the actual fees we're paying them? So for example, is the lender going to be paying them also? Because that does happen a lot of times in the private equity world. So we may be paying 2%, but they're getting another 0.5% or 0.75% on the back end from whoever they place. That should be disclosed to us as well. What is the total fees they're collecting from everybody, not just us? Because inevitably we're the borrower, we're paying those because they're going to be amortized into our interest rate. That's kind of like when you pay discount points. It's the same idea there. They said, hey, we found you a solid investment. They're paying us X, we need you to pay us Y. So I don't know how it works with this type of transaction, but I just want to make sure that regardless of what the law requires, we want full disclosure with the representation from both whoever we end up borrowing from, as well as the placement agent, that this is the total fees paid to this placement agent. No other fees or of compensation of any type has been passed between the bank and the placement agent. So, other than that, I'm in support of searching out options. I mean, I think it's a good idea to take a look at our finances in any way we can. So I fully support option 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Lau?
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, I agree that we should try to stick to this option two, the private placement. And especially these two consultants, they don't charge us anything. And we didn't sign any contract with them, so we don't have any binding contract per se. So I think we should, well, we can, of course, we still can shop around. And the fees, I think, to me, is pretty reasonable, less than 2%. So even if we don't agree, whatever they recommend with the bank, at least we know what kind of a financial help that we can get at this, sort of a difficult time. And also we can find out what other banks that or lenders think about the financial soundness of St. Gabriel, because we never borrow bond, never have any credit rating or anything before, so we don't know, because we pretty much haven't done any of those. So it's good that maybe we can sort of look at ourselves and say, hey, what is our credit worthy right now? But the main thing is they can help us to find a private placement. Hopefully it's a good one, and so we can solve this credit problem by June 30th. But again, it's not that we have to do it, but because the state auditors, they want to see that we have done anything. I think that's the number one thing they requested, why we borrow that $7.8 million from the beginning. So, but we just have to work with the auditor and maybe listen to them and comply. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pu?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do have actually another question for Ken and Mark, because Ken, you mentioned that a 20-year leaseback structure would yield debt service payments or lease payments similar to the debt service what we're used to paying now on a sort of cash flow basis, I take it. Using the same set of assumptions, I don't know if you use a certain assumption in terms of a interest rate in that comparison, but it looks like going to the market now, banks wouldn't really be that interested in giving us a 20-year lease back, but there is interest in a 15-year lease back. How much more in debt service would that be for? Do you understand what I'm saying? How much more would it impact our cash flow and debt service by it being a 15-year lease back versus 20 years?
We haven't got those quotes yet from them. He just contacted me and said, hey, there's no interest in you guys in a 20-year, but in a 15-year, I'm generating some interest. Currently, we pay about $370,000 a year in debt service for our current loan. So we're looking for a amount of the year that would be generated approximately that same payment. So no, I don't know what the new payment amount would be, but obviously a little more.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just writing down notes here. And did you say that's $370,000 per year?
Yeah, on average about $360, $370 per year we're currently paying. That's principal and interest.
Right. Roughly, yeah, a little bit over 20K per, a little bit over 30K per month. All right.
Yes.
Okay. So I would agree with my colleagues. Also, I don't see any harm, obviously, in moving forward in adopting the recommended action, but also maybe even broadening it, expanding it, just to say, you know, it seems like this would be the team that, you know, the only team we could probably get to if we're gonna get this done before the end of the fiscal year. And if it, you know, if they bring back a good enough deal, then, you know, the $123,000 in fees is not, it's not necessarily unreasonable. I agree with Vice Mayor Liao on that. Any other, you know, placement agent and bond counsel we go to, it's going to be probably roughly similar. But the one point is that this is going to be a long-term financial obligation, so we want to get the best deal possible. And since we're not obligated in any way, shape, or form, there's no downside, obviously, to adopting the recommended action now. But keeping our eye out and potentially if you know, if this first pass doesn't yield a deal that we're comfortable enough with, then we can look at some of those longer term processes, the RFPs for placement agent and bond counsel has been mentioned. I think we're all definitely in agreement that the private placement option is the one that we want to go for. We absolutely need to refinance this loan. There's no question about that. But I do think that the interest rate environment is going to stay favorable, especially with COVID-19. I can't see the Fed raising rates significantly in the next 6 months or so. And I think that I think that the window of opportunity, I mean, unless there's something that, you know, I don't know that Mark or Ken, that you know about the window of opportunity, I think it will remain open, and that therefore we could continue shopping even if they were not able to find a deal that we like, you know, within the next couple of months. So those are my thoughts, so I would support the private placement and moving forward with the recommended action, with all the sort of nuance that has been brought out in the council discussion here, that, you know, not necessarily needing to be obligated to do any of the deal that they might bring forward, and I think that it would be wise if in the next couple of months it doesn't yield a good enough deal, then we could then we would, you know, I think go out and continue shopping. I don't think we have, you know, forever though to do this. I would say we need to probably close this within the next year or so. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ding.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, yeah. So, for my understanding, yes, also the private placement, I think it's just for the short term, right? So we expecting, looks like the projected expecting like 20 years the refinance, but I can't. So you got the information, just a private bank just only can do like 15 years, right? The term.
They can do 20, but they're concerned we're a credit risk, so they want to do a shorter term.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So because I think I hear about it, it's because the audit. So we have to. Is it we have to make a decision before the June 30, or we can. We
don't have to. It's only basically to get it off our financials. The state has the biggest issues with our financials, and that's why they're doing a state audit.
Okay.
Even when we flew up to Sacramento, that was their biggest issue about the negative on our financials.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I agree the option 2, but also like for the cost, explaining costs. For me, I don't know. But it sounds like some city council say the probably it's reasonable. But if like for my understanding, if they do some loan transaction, they're talking about the private or commercial loan, the bank, they should be already observe all the costs. Maybe they tell us how much costs. Not like a loan agent, they extra charge. So I wish that maybe if we can save the discount cost, $123 to $123,000. Still, it's for us because of deficit, it's still a lot of money. And but based on the report, say that currently if we're shopping around, it's no cash impact. Is that meaning? So they shopping around for us, no charge until we have the contract. They will be charged on like estimate 123,000.
Yeah, that's correct. We've made it very clear that there's no liability on our part. Although they put a lot of legwork into it at this point, they understand that we could simply walk away if we wanted to, if the council wanted to.
Okay. All right. So so if this situation, yeah, I think option 2, it's okay. We can moving forward and shopping around the private bank. Yeah.
Are you finished with your questions?
Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great, Councilor. Well, on my part, I've been feeling since the next day after we entered into this transaction, we needed to refinance. We needed to improve our liquidity and cash flow. The state audit just has kind of put a light under the fire for us because they have brought that up several times. I too would like to just find out, what kind of financing options we have. I like to, again, have maybe a menu of different choices, 15 years, 20 years. What are all the costs involved in refinancing that CD? Just making sure we get that commitment. The bank said something now, but maybe they'll change their mind later. But I think it is an opportunity right now with COVID. Maybe that's one of the silver linings right now is that I think there is going to be an interest. And yes, there is money out there, but maybe we could find something that definitely the interest rate, but and I believe the 123,000 is reasonable considering this type of transaction. But I think we can really spend the time now to really look at something that we've all been talking about, since we did the transaction. I mean, I don't think anyone was pleased with the transaction. We were kind of stuck with it, but I think we can do better. So I too agree that we should continue to negotiate. And again, I'm not sure on this agenda item, do we need to vote or can we just have, I think the staff has direction because right now we're working with this group, but I want to make sure that staff's hands aren't tied. You can work with any group. Maybe some other group will come to mind. Maybe Councilman Harrington could pass along some ideas, but I think we all would like to continue the negotiations. And so do we need to vote for this as is, or can we just nod?
I don't think this contemplates a formal action. I think this is more of a head nod.
Okay,
So they're
good.
really just polling you guys, seeing where you are, and then that will inform what they do next.
Great, thank you. Yeah, according to my notes here, I was informed that we were supposed to vote, so that's why I was clarifying it. Okay, so
Can I follow up there? Just one quick question. If I can just summarize what I heard so I can make sure that we're all on the same page. I heard resoundingly that everybody is interested in option 2, which is the private placement rather than trying to go with the traditional bond market. And then I think I heard from at least 3 of you that we should finish getting proposals from this group to see what the proposals come back like, but that we shouldn't lock ourselves in. And once we see what those proposals are, we should look at this from another perspective of potentially getting further bids and looking at other banks in the future if we don't get an offer that is the one that we can't pass up.
And I think Councilman Harrington, did you want to have some comments? think I
Yeah,
heard
and this
you.
is, yes, thank you, Mayor. This is regarding the placement agent. I just want to clarify, Mark, have we executed anything with this agent, any agreements or anything at all?
Nothing at all. I have an email with them that says we're not on the hook for anything. I've told them we wouldn't pay a dime to them if they worked on our behalf. And I told them that we would need council direction to do anything. And they assured me that, yes, we are not on the hook for anything.
And they don't expect us to execute anything before they start bringing us deals, because sometimes they do.
No, we made it very clear that we are not going to execute anything until we see what they're bringing back.
Okay, because a lot of times what will happen is they will bring you a deal, and then so for example, they want you to sign something before they tell you who the deal is going to come from, and then if you 6 months later sign with that bank for that transaction, they're gonna collect their fees. I just want to make sure we had not signed anything, because it would make sense, in my opinion, to use more than one placement agent, because you're going to get it's going to open up how many banks, because they all deal with specific banks. No placement agent deals with every bank, and we may find a bank in the Southeast. We don't know. We may find one in the Midwest. It doesn't have to be in California. You know, it's federal. You can find banks anywhere, and they may also have private investors. There's some of them, they compete with banks all the time. A lot of private equity do municipal investments, so it just depends on who we're looking for. So I would widen the scope to how many placement agents we're working with. That's my opinion. So, thank you.
Mark, did you want to respond? Because I think that was also my comment, was that, you know, do we have to limit ourselves to this placement agent?
We absolutely don't. I mean, we can talk to other folks on the side to see if there are different deals out there. As I said, Ken and I reached out and called somebody. We didn't do an RFP or a wider look. We can start to look at those wider looks to see what we get.
Great. Okay, so let's move forward. Next items.
Item C, General Plan Housing Element Annual Progress Report for the 2019 calendar year. Presentation will be made by Management Specialist Mark Gallatin.
Good evening, Mayor Menchaca, Vice Mayor Liao, members of council, Mr. Lazaretto, and Mr. Lemieux. This is Mark Gallatin, Management Specialist from the Community Development Department, and it's my pleasure to present to you tonight the General Plan Housing Element Annual Progress Report for the 2019 calendar year. By way of background, every city in California is required to prepare an annual report which gets submitted to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, and to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, or OPR, every April. And the annual report is intended to be an assessment or an inventory of all of the dwelling units that were permitted during the previous calendar year. San Gabriel is currently in what we call the 5th housing element cycle. And I believe we have a slide, if that could be put up, that hits some of these points I'm going to make. But San Gabriel is currently in the 5th housing element cycle. Housing element law was adopted back in 1980 and created cycles which originally were 4 years long, but subsequent legislation lengthened them to as much as 8 years. So we are currently in the 5th cycle, which covers the period 2013 to 2021. So we'll have 2 more of these annual reports before this cycle concludes. The annual progress report is an important tool to facilitate the implementation of the housing element and in tracking and monitoring the city's progress in addressing the regional housing needs allocation, commonly known as RHNA. If we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. This year's report, one change in the methodology or the reporting requirements is that this year's report requires cities to explain how affordable units that did not have financial assistance or deed restrictions were deemed affordable. And when we get to the next slide in a moment and take a look at the chart, I'll explain a little bit more about that and the methodology used. So at this point, I'd like to ask if we could have the next slide, please. And while we're waiting for that, the next slide is the actual chart that shows the regional housing needs, or RHNA, progress for 2019. And in the year 2019, we had a total of 34 new dwelling units issued building permits. Now, again, reporting requirements have changed since the last time I worked on one of these, which was in 2016 for the city. At that time, the law was such that you had to report all of the potential units that you had zoned for. And there's the slide up now. Thank you very much. So subsequent to that, the report now has to show actual production of housing units, and specifically not units that have been entitled, that have received planning commission approval or design review approval, but have not pulled building permits. The only ones that can be counted towards your RHNA progress are those that actually have been issued a building permit. And so that's what the table on this slide shows, going back to 2014 at the beginning of the current cycle. So in 2019, you'll see that we had 34 total units, 21 of which fell into the low income category and were non-deed restricted. And then the remaining 13 units fell into the above moderate category. Just by way of progress, if we look at our city allocation that was given to us for this 8-year cycle, it was 930 units, which is down at the right under the green column on the left on the chart there. We have an allocation of 930 units to be built over this 8-year period. And thus far, including 2019, we have built or issued permits for 372 units. So that equates to 40% of our allocation has been met. If we could see the next slide, please. I'll just brief you on some highlights of the report. And while we're waiting for the next slide to come up, let me just read off those highlights. Again, only units for which building permits have been issued count towards the city's RHNA target number. And in the current cycle, beginning 2013, San Gabriel has permitted 372 units, which is exactly 40% of its RHNA allocation of 930. And for the first time in this cycle, ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, made up the majority of units receiving building permits in the previous year. And this is reflective of a growing interest in ADUs in the community, as well as reflective of state legislation that has been adopted in the last couple of years to facilitate the construction of ADUs as a way to help alleviate the housing crisis. ADUs on our chart are being counted as affordable to low-income households for a couple of reasons. Number one, due to their relatively small size, and two, to a documented methodology which demonstrates the affordability of these units using the most recent American Community Survey estimates for citywide median rent and number of rooms per dwelling unit. From that, we were able to calculate a median rent per month per room. And this is the fourth bullet point on the slide that's up now. Calculate a median rent per month per room, which equated to an amount below the affordability threshold for low-income households as defined in our housing element. So that's why the ADUs, the 21 ADUs, appear as affordable to low-income households. Basically, what we are asking the council to do tonight is to receive and file the report and direct staff to submit it to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR. At this point, I'd be happy to take any questions that the council might have.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say welcome back, Mark. I can't believe
Thank you, Madam
3
Mayor.
years.
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's great to have you back. Unfortunately, under these circumstances, but thank you for making yourself available. I know you were enjoying your retirement, but
I'm happy to help out any way I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we'll start with the clarifying questions. Vice Mayor Lau?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And hi, Mark. Long time no see.
Hi, Vice Mayor.
Say
How
hi
are
to
you?
Annie for me.
I will do that.
We miss
You
you
bet.
guys. We miss you.
Mhm.
So the question, number one, I ask Malik, California cities, this, if ADUs can be credited for rate numbers, and they say yes, definitely yes. So, in 2018, we approved 36 ADU units, but we only counted 21. So what's the problem with the rest of 15 units?
Well, it's not so much a problem as it is just where they are in the pipeline of from entitlement to construction. We definitely approved more than the 21 units that are showing on the chart, but the 21 units are those that actually pulled a building permit in 2019, and therefore they're the only ones that we can count towards our ADU target. The ones that have already received approval, whether it was previously a discretionary approval from Planning Commission, or whether it was a staff approval, a ministerial approval from staff, but have not yet pulled a building permit, those cannot be counted on this year's report. So they might be in plan check, for example, or maybe they haven't gotten that far yet. Maybe they were just recently entitled. But until a building permit is actually issued, they cannot be counted in the current year's annual report.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, the recent development project, and we always want to ask developers to build certain units for affordable housings, but always come back and say, hey, the developer is willing to pay in lieu of certain fees instead of building the affordable units. Mm-hmm. Number one, I guess we're not going to catch up those rate numbers, but number two, how do we assess and say, hey, you have to pay certain number to meet, that we willing to let you make, instead of building the affordable units, but you have to pay. So how do you assess the dollar amount and say, hey, we want you to pay this much, and so what's your answer?
So basically what you're talking about is an in lieu fee,
yes.
Rather than actually building the units. They can contribute a determined amount that goes into a fund that the city then uses to subsidize the construction of affordable housing. And for those that are on the council, and maybe it's just Council Member Harrington at this point, that remember when we had redevelopment prior to 2012, it used to be state law that when you built a mixed-use project or a housing development in a redevelopment project area, by law, 15% of those units had to be affordable. Then that, of course, was dismantled by the state in 2012. Now there are a couple mechanisms by which communities can get that commitment or get those funds for housing. One is through development agreements, and I believe San Gabriel's just recently done one with the project at 220 South San Gabriel Boulevard, which I believe may have included a certain percentage of affordable units, and those would be deed restricted, and that's how you would enforce it. The other way is an item that I believe is coming up shortly here on our agenda tonight, which is talking about certain housing programs that we would be undertaking, which would include, but not be limited to, an inclusionary zoning ordinance. And an inclusionary zoning ordinance, would give the city the mechanism by which to say to a developer, okay, you want to build housing here, you have to provide, a certain percentage, or in lieu of providing a certain percentage of units that are affordable, you have to pay a fee. And that, there would have to be foundational analysis done before you adopt that ordinance to come up with a methodology that describes and explains how you arrive at that in lieu fee. It's kind of like, I guess, comparable to the mechanism we used when we first instituted impact fees and helping to determine, how those would be calculated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Mark. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you.
And I do remember redevelopment in in St. Gabriel's infancy. We just had started when the state decided to cut it off. And then, we come into these situations where we really can't be an effective agency in having control over how many houses and how many units get built. So, and the one hand, they're taking our tools away, and then the other hand, they're telling us to build better cities. So that's just my comment on redevelopment. But other than that, I don't really have any questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ding.
Thank you, Mark. But on my screen, I cannot see Mark. Okay.
Well, none of us can.
Okay.
Just as well. I haven't had a haircut in 2 months, so.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your report. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the Councilmember Liao and Councilmember Harrington already asked the question. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pu.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Mark. Oops.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, great. Hope you're staying healthy and safe. I don't have any questions, but thanks for the report.
Very good. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't have any questions either. I don't know if you call it clarifying questions, but we just have so much work ahead. Some things don't change, Mark. Those numbers are just so high, and it just seems so impossible to get to those housing allocations. But we just need to forge ahead. So thank you again for your work, Mark.
You're very welcome,
We
Mayor.
have
Thank
two
you.
Marks now. Mark Gallatin.
Yes.
I'm always thanking Mark Lazaretto too, but but this time it's like Gallatin. Let's see. Let me announce the time for public comment on this item is now closed. Assistant City Clerk, please read any comments you might have received.
Mayor, we haven't received any comments for this item.
Okay. So now we move into council deliberations and discussions. Let's see if we have any further comments. I'll start with Councilmember Harrington.
Nothing to add, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Pu.
Nothing to add for me either. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Ding.
Yeah, nothing for me too.
Okay. Councilmember Vice Mayor Lau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything right now. Thank you.
Great. So now I need a motion to be made.
I'll motion.
Okay. And I need a second for the recommended action. Okay, I'll second. Okay, so Assistant Clerk, City Clerk Bonus, please take a vote.
Councilmember Ding,
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Pu,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Liao,
Aye.
Mayor Menchaca.
Aye.
The motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Okay, next item, please.
Public comment. This is the second opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on items of interest that are not on the agenda. Comments will be read for up to 3 minutes. Assistant City Clerk Bonus, please read any comments that have been received.
There are no comments that have been received at this time.
Well, thank you. Next item, city managers report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have nothing tonight.
Now, council comments and conference/meeting reports. We'll start with Councilmember Ding.
Yeah, okay, that's, thank you, the mayor, thank you all, the council, and thank you all the city staff, the executive staff, yes. Also thank my my resident give me opportunity to service our city, and yeah, so that's my first like council meeting. So I got a lot of information. So I wish I can learning all of from you, all of the team member and all the council member. So try provide a better service for our city. Oh yeah, by the way, probably on the Friday we still have the some organization that donate the mask to the city employee. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm sure you'll do great, Councilmember Ding. And this is my first meeting too, presiding. So we're in it together. So,
okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Harrington, any comments?
Thank you, Mayor. No, I have no nothing to add. Thank you.
Councilmember Pu.
I just wanted to mention that been talking with council members from the other cities in the West San Gabriel Valley, as well as with folks at the Department of Public Health, to see if we can't get more testing sites in our immediate West San Gabriel Valley area. I do think this is going to be one of the most important aspects going forward, especially as we're evaluating when and how to open things back up again. We know that we're going to need a lot more testing. So I'm gonna continue to, tilt at the windmills and bang my head against the wall to see if we can't do that and get some more sites within the West San Gabriel Valley area. And then the other thing I would add is I know that Mark and Ken and you, Mayor Menchaca, are also monitoring the federal legislation closely. So if I could request that we get regular updates as to whether or not that relief from the federal government for cities smaller than 500,000, including lost revenues, because I think that one piece is so critically important for our city and every small city across the country, to be honest with you, that it'll that one thing can change our entire outlook and planning for the next fiscal year. So, I think that those two items are of critical importance for us going forward in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pu. And I just wanted to emphasize to the community the amount of work that you have taken upon yourself to find a testing site in our area and working collaboratively with the West San Gabriel Valley cities. I just want to make sure you're recognized for that.
Wow.
And we need you to stay healthy, so don't bang your head too much. Yeah. Let us know how we can help you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything that you continue to do. Vice Mayor Lau?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to say, appreciations from the private parties and community nonprofits organization. I received, at least dozens of these people that came to our city hall, donate all kinds of PPE. And tomorrow there's another group that's going to donate 4,000 PPE. And so with all this donation, I think the St. Gabriel Lions Club and the Chinese American construction professionals, they're going to host it's called a drive-through free face mask and also gloves to give away. And on top of that, we will provide bags of free food also. So the place is the St. Gabriel Mission Playhouse parking lot, and the time is Friday from 10 o'clock to 12 p.m. So only 2 hours time left. So everyone is welcome. Anyone needs anything, just come. So, you know, we're gonna help our communities that everyone can have enough protection for their own, so, and enough food for their households. So again, I'm thank you for those people that step up and show their kindness to our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And if you have any information, a flyer with the details, please send it along to the rest of the council members too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I muted myself. There I am. Let's see, last week I attended the opening of the COVID-19 testing site at the San Gabriel Valley Airport in El Monte. Just a reminder to the community, testing is free and no insurance is required. However, you must make an appointment online in advance. LA County now has 30 testing sites, so go online to see which one's the closest. East LA Community College is also free, and it's a drive-up COVID-19 mobile test site. Second, I wanted to, again, just express my appreciation for participating in the parade yesterday, both Councilmember Hu and Councilmember Ding. We were able to be there. Our police officers were the key organizers, and specifically Detective Logan. It included police and fire from Alhambra, San Marino, and Pasadena. And there was also a Pasadena helicopter that kind of flew around to kind of add to the excitement. I have to tell you, just looking at the healthcare professionals, they were just truly touched. They were excited. They were waving. Our police officers were able to, and fire, were able to gather baskets of appreciation. And they were taken so quickly I couldn't even see what was in it, but it looked like a lot of stuff, a lot of goodies. But there was a lot of excitement. Papa John's also donated pizzas, so pizzas were gone too. But it was just a really wonderful way, special way to celebrate. And we were all keeping our distance. We had our masks, and we did what we should be doing. And I just wanted to remind everyone that our healthcare professionals, they're leaving their families to serve as families to all these patients, even those that don't have the virus, but specifically those who have the virus. Again, it's such an isolating disease. And there's been so many cases that have been shown, written about, where the last person, those who have passed away are our healthcare professionals, and they've done such amazing work to try to connect them to their loved ones. So they deserve our respect, our praise, and appreciation for all their sacrifices. So anyway, so thank you again, Chief Harris and your crew, and Chief Wallace. It was just a very special moment. So thank you for including us. And next item, closed session, there is none. And the next regular city council meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 5th at 6:30 p.m. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.